Good evening, my sisters and brothers, and welcome to this 11th episode of It's Your Time Now. In case you're wondering why we gave this program that name, it was because we have noticed over time that after every general election, the victorious party declares to the other side, "Is we time now?" Well, in this program, we tell the people, it's your time now. It is your time now to tell them that we are fed up with the present political system, which places almost total power in the hands of the government once they are elected. And they have the power to decide what they are going to do, and then they have the power to vote themselves any amount of money they want. And it does not matter which side wins. It's that not what is happening, is that not what is happening to us for the past 50 years? And why is that so? In the past, the powers that be and the power brokers have always decided the kind of constitution we get. And without fail, they always propose a constitution that will deal with their problems and their concerns, not ours, not the problems of the people. Well, they have had their day and they have had their say. It's your time now. We have stated on this program that we believe that neither the government nor the opposition wants meaningful constitutional reform. May the Lord forgive me if we are wrong. We think that they want to maintain the present electoral system of first past the post in a society that is racially divided and ethnically distributed as ours is. So that after every election, one of them is bound to form the government and the other will be in the opposition. Isn't that exactly what has been happening to us since 1956? When in 1970, the Workers' and Farmers' Party began fighting for the return of the ballot box and threatened to boycott the 1976 elections, general elections, as they had done in 71. Did the late great Dr. Eric Williams, then Prime Minister, not say, and I quote, "They want ballot box? Well, we can give them any kind of box they want. Matchbox, cardboard box, pine box. The results will be the same, 24-12. That, I'm afraid, was an admission that the doctor had succumbed to the politics of race. Later, the learned gentleman was reported to have said, I quote him again, "Proportional representation is a dagger aimed at the heart of the PNM." That is why when, in 1976, Dr. Williams changed the Constitution from monarchical to republican, it was a change of mere form, not of substance. The system remained the same. I'm not saying this to criticize or condemn anyone in any way. I am merely using history to prove my point that the powers that be do not want meaningful constitutional change. They prefer to keep the races divided politically. The politics for them remains easier that way. Neither has the present Prime Minister indicated an irrevocable commitment to serious constitutional reform before the next elections. All her utterances on the subject matter so far have indicated her intention is mere constitutional amendments, tinkering with the Constitution, so to speak. The constitutional amendments are a poor substitute for constitutional reform. For these reasons, I believe constitutional reform is not going to come easy. If the people want it, they will have to fight for it. But in order to be motivated to fight for it, they must understand it and be committed to it. and then be ready to struggle for it. Look at what is happening in the rest of the world. People are giving their lives for meaningful change. The alternative is to continue with the nonsense that we have been experiencing for more than 50 years. It is said that doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is the first sign of madness. I also suspect that the authorities will delay this issue of constitutional reform until close to the 2015 elections, and then say that there is not enough time to introduce constitutional reform before the elections, and they're going to use that as an excuse, once again, to postpone constitutional reform until after the elections and maybe forever. And we shall never get it. Is that not exactly what they did with the promise for local government reform? We must demand constitutional reform before the next elections. That must be our battle cry. I may be wrong in my assessment of all that I have just said. If I am, there is only one way to find out. Invite all the leaders of all the political parties to appear on this platform to discuss with the people their views on constitutional reform without fear or favor, malice or ill will. My guest for this evening is in keeping with that promise. He is the Member of Parliament for St. Augustine and Minister of Legal Affairs. He attended the Presentation College, Saguanas, and is a graduate of the Heward Inglow School. He attended the University of West Indies. I said that, and where he got an LLB, and then he attended the law school. He was called to the bar in 1987, and has practiced mostly at the criminal bar for some 20 years. He is a political leader of the Congress of the People and a partner in the People's Partnership Government. He's also chairman of the National Consultation on Constitutional Reform set up under the present government. Sisters and brothers, the Honorable Prakash Ramadhar.
Good day.
Welcome, and thanks for coming to this program. Mr. Ramadhar, thank you for accepting our invitation to be on this program, in which we examine the critical issue of constitutional reform. This is our 11th episode, and we have had a lot of feedback from the widest cross-section of the population. What seems to be the most vexing question is the inability of the people to control the government once they are elected into power. The suggestion is that the people's representatives in Parliament should control and monitor the government. But under the present constitution, the Parliament cannot control the government because the government controls the Parliament. It has been suggested that the only way the Parliament can effectively control the government is to separate the Parliament from the government. What is your take on that?
First of all, what a pleasure and honor it is to be with you and to join in the conversation. And I want to hope that your cynicism is not well-founded. Let me just say that I became involved in politics for the very reason that you've articulated, that we've seen that the politicians and the political game of the past was always about empowering the politicians and parties as distinct from the people. I became in politics, as you know, in 2007 in the Congress of the People. Its very formation really was about reform of the nation. As you point out, if you keep doing the same thing over and over and expect different results, well then certainly on the wrong road. You need to change the game. You need to change the rules of the game if you want to have a different outcome. And that is why I believe in the reform agenda of the Congress of the People. One of the foremost requirements of that reform, all of the problems that we see in society could be traced in some way back to the Constitution itself, which sets the framework for how we govern and the relationship between the people and those they empower to rule. And that is why constitutional reform is a top priority of the Congress of the People, and one of the main reasons that we continue to participate in the People's Partnership. By almost divine intervention, we are on that road. Part of the manifesto of the People's Partnership promises constitutional reform. And when you spoke about, you have elections and then the people really have no say as to what happens, I agree with you. We have democracy for a day, that is on election day, and after which governments of the past will act without any regard to the wishes of the people. And I say that is wrong. And that is why in our manifesto, the People's Partnership Manifesto, which the Congress of the People had articulated since 2006, going into 2007, was the need for constitutional reform, for referenda, for proportional representation, fixed election dates, fixed terms, and a host of other things. As you say, we do not want to tinker with small amendments, but you can amend the present constitution to bring fundamental change. So it's really semantics to say whether it's an amendment or reform itself, because the substance, as you say, is what matters, not the form as much. Now, in that regard, let me just say that we have concluded our public consultations, and we thank you for your contributions right here in Chaguanas, very meaningful contributions, because our view was that the constitution should come from the people and not like from other administrations where they prepare one and then put it out there and say, let's hear what your views are, and we go forward with what we want. So that is where we are at. I want to say that we are at the stage now of the actual preparation of the report. It's completed, it's just to be finessed, and then we shall take it back to the population for them to know, our people, because it's their constitution, and we are the agents of the people, and we need to empower them. And the issue of referenda, maybe we should spend a few moments to explain what that really is about. When the property tax had come as a thief in the night under the last administration, it took a movement that spread across the nation where the people said, we don't want this, where valuations would have been put on your homes that many people were fearful that they may not have been able to pay and would lose their homes. It took an election to get rid of that. The issue of rapid rail, $26 billion upfront expenditure.
But I have seen on the papers where the Minister of Finance is talking about the reintroduction of the, property tax.
I'm happy that we have the opportunity to clarify that, that there will be no interference with residential properties. There can be none. And we return to the land and building taxes. I'll just give you the example of that. Rapid rail was one other example where they were running it through the most densely populated areas of the East-West corridor down into Central, destroying huge communities. When the issue of smelter had come about, and a large part of the population said, we don't want this here, the government at the time said 3 instead of 0. Referenda is that mechanism that empowers the people during election dates to give the power to the people for true representation. On a very significant point when you spoke about elected representatives.
But if you have genuine constitutional reform, the referendum becomes irrelevant because the People's Parliament,
I was about to raise that point,
will be raising these issues from day to day.
I could hardly agree with you more, sir. I could hardly agree with you more. That when you are elected as an MP for a constituency, you have to reflect the views of the constituents. But in the present system, that nobody has taken the time until now to look at, and we've had many contributions from the floor, including yours, that says, look, elected representatives should be there in the legislature to deal with the laws, but that the administrative part, that is those who form the cabinet and those who are given the authority to spend, must be separate from them, so that those who are elected will be a watchdog over those who are given the power to spend, and there must be that separation. Under the present circumstance, the persons who are elected are put into cabinet, so the executive is controlled by those who are supposed to be the watchdog. And that system needs to be attended to. And that is why we went to the population. And we've had, and I do not wish now to say, before we make the full report public, what the recommendations are going to be. But that must be attended to. And throughout the nation, that was a call from the people that there must be that separation.
Oh, okay, tell me.
Yes.
Will there be constitutional reform before the next elections?
That is why I chose to be chairman of it. In the past...
Is the answer yes?
The answer must be, because it's a promise. As far as I'm concerned, I didn't come into politics for any other reason than to make my country better. As you have dedicated your life, I've given my profession, I've given my life to my country. And that constitutional reform is a must, it is a promise in the manifesto. And I made public statements, and I shall make it here today, that if it does not come, well, then I will pay a price for it. Because I chose to be chairman of the constitutional reform to ensure that the report is given in and for action to be taken before the next election date. And let me tell you why. A manifesto is for an election period of 5 years. There is no second term contemplated in a manifesto. There ought never to be. It is a contract that we have made with the people, and I, for one, am intent on keeping it.
So we can tell the people that the next elections, general elections of this country, will be held under a reformed constitution.
There must be,
can we say
or
that?
there'll be consequences to that. I am saying I will do all within my authority to ensure that that is done.
I think you would have given a lot of people a lot of hope, because people have become rather disenchanted and they feel the government makes promises and they don't keep it. So I think this is an excellent point at which we ought to take a little break, give the sponsors a little chance
Of course.
to have their say.
To truly sponsor.
Is their time, is their time
Of course.
now. Welcome back. Minister, you left us on a high note, and you said that there will be constitutional reform before the next elections, and the next elections will be held under constitutional reform. Is it possible to have an indication of when this report will be out and what will happen after the report comes out?
Well, what we've promised during the consultations, it was asked by many members of the public, that before we go to legislative change, that we should bring the report to the population, what I think is absolutely necessary and fair. We are at an advanced stage. In fact, the report is basically done. It's just being finished now, so that we shall present it to the Cabinet and the Prime Minister and put it into the public domain for further comment, and then go to actual legislative preparation. And that can be done very early next year. Very early next year in terms of actual drafting, and brought to the Parliament shortly thereafter.
Okay, all right. I'm sure a lot of people will be very pleased to hear that, because that's the kind of fares we've been getting.
Of course.
I'm glad you've come on this program. But in order to get constitutional reform, you need the support of both the government and the opposition, because you need a majority,
of course. And that's why it might be interesting to note, maybe, I always believe in cautionary consequences of things. We had intended to have this report done maybe a year ago, but for one reason or the other, it was delayed. Let me see which member of Parliament shall vote against the empowerment of the people with a general election on the horizon.
Well, as you know, in order to get those views, and again to allay fears of the people, and to let them feel that we shall have the cooperation of the powers that be on both sides of the House,
yes.
I propose to ask the other leaders of the political parties to come and tell the people what's happening.
That's only fair.
As a matter of course.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
So I propose to ask Dr. Rowley if he'd come. and finally the Prime Minister.
I'll be riveted to my TV looking at Mr. Rowley's interview, because I've heard some of the pronouncements that have emanated from his party, and they may not be all that encouraging, but that is really to really preempt what they actually have to say on the matter. So
of course.
Let's be optimistic, because without a hope, then we are hopeless. And I do believe that when there's a will, and there is a will on the ground for change, we must have it. And if we are to have any democracy at all, those who have total disregard for the wish of the people must pay the ultimate price.
I'm glad you say that, because that is the feeling I get from the groundswell,
yes.
is that the people need change.
But we must have it. For so long we've been going through the same old and the complaint year after year, administration after administration. It must change now, and the world has changed with the new media and the awareness and the openness now to criticize. They're all the tin gods of the past.
Minister,
people are challenging them.
I was telling someone,
Yes.
it is people wondering, why is the world in so much turmoil, say in the Middle East and other parts of the world? It is the communication revolution.
Absolutely.
The revolution in communication has so widened and lifted people's consciousness that they are more conscious of their rights and their duties and their liabilities and so on.
Well, sir, could I stop you right away?
Sure.
Many have forgotten that under your administration, and I remember this as a younger person, when you allowed for the removal of taxes on computers, I thought it was one of the brightest moments in our political history, because you opened up the atmosphere for new thinking and all the problems we may have with modern media and the social networking and everything else. That is a necessary evil of something that is far more fundamental, so that the voice of the people, and the old democratic saying that it is better for a government to be afraid of the people, I think that's necessary. And the only way that will happen is when people organize and know that when they speak, they do not speak singularly, but there are many, many others who share their view and will come together in necessary time to make change happen.
And as I was saying, it is because of this revolution in communication that the young people in the not only in Trinidad, but the rest of the world are beginning to realize their rights and their liabilities and so on. And they don't buy into the old system.
No.
And so if you notice, we have alienated the young people. They no longer feel that they are part of this system. They no longer feel they could belong. They feel it's a lot of crap that's going on here. And we have got to win them back into the system. Yes. And the only way is constitutional reform.
Exactly. And if you don't feel empowered or even relevant to the government structure, then you leave it, you abdicate it to those who will betray your trust.
Exactly.
You need to be involved to participate. And the way to do that really is to change the system to allow that, for there to be more democracy. Democracy cannot be left to government, and I do not mean this any particular administration. Democracy is about the power of the people to influence the changes they wish to see. Government, of course, will have its purpose, and it comes from the old Latin to steer, meaning that you are given the authority to put a direction and a vision for people, and then they have the administrative facets of it to ensure that corruption is weeded out. That the wishes of the people are well represented in the direction and policy of God. That is why you have manifesto. And in the past, manifestos were just produced for the sake of producing them, without any intent to live up to those promises. I take a different view. Because this government takes a different view.
Because there was nothing in the Constitution
to enforce it. You see?
That's the point.
Until the next election. But the point you've raised, and that has really dogged our society, is notwithstanding the failures of the past, people will vote along racial lines and other divides, so that the very people who betray you, because you think that you're more familiar with them, you allow them the authority to continue. Proportional representation is in need to change that.
Exactly. If they have nothing else to turn to,
they'll turn to the streets.
They'll turn back to their history. Yes. Their history is a history of racial voting in the country and so on and so forth. But I'm glad you mentioned proportional representation, because I believe that what you need to do is to encourage people, including the young, to vote on the basis of interests, social and economic interests. That farmers must be able to come together and say, listen, we want people in that parliament. The workers must be able to say, we want people in that parliament. And they must be able to come together as groups and put their representatives in parliament. And parliament's function has got to be to make the laws, obviously. But it must, as I say, we must introduce mechanisms, and I hope you guys are thinking about this, to introduce mechanisms to make sure that the government is able to control the government. For example,
Parliament,
most important appointments should be ratified by Parliament.
You mean like in the American system where you have hearings and so?
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
For example, what's it been, how much, 3 years now? We have not been able to appoint a police commissioner.
We can't
appoint, and crime is the most vexing problem in the country, and we can't appoint a police commissioner under the system.
And laws were changed in 2006 to facilitate a better system, and it turned out to be very circuitous and defeating the very purpose of that. So you're quite right, and that we do need to take a fresh look at the appointments at high levels, because it is wrong for a stranger to the people to be given great authority. So these are all the things that we must look at and attend to in this term.
Yeah, I was wondering, and you see, the system creates all kinds of anomalies.
Yes.
For example, the commissioner is one. And I read the other day in the papers, Minister Barrett saying that the bad attitudes are driving investors away. And he was talking about the behavior of the people at the airport.
Oh, yes.
That when an investor comes into the country, the first person he interfaces with is the people at the airport, the immigration officers and so on. And if they turn him away, chances of getting advertisement are going to be severely reduced. But when I read that Mr. Barrett was saying that bad attitudes are driving away investors, the first thing that occurred to me, to whom was he speaking? Couldn't possibly be speaking to me. What he was really saying is that the system does not allow for them to do things about it.
Yes. Well, as you know, there are protected offices and so. But you cannot have a system where there are no consequences to actions. And we've seen the failure of systems that are supposed to protect against political interference being betrayed to the point that there's sometimes no consequence to bad behavior and failure to act. The country must change those things, because we could complain as much as we want, and if there's no authority to force a consequence, to create the change,
That's right.
then we are wasting time. And in private industry, as you know, there's always a mechanism for anybody who's not fulfilling their duty to be dealt with. That sensitivity must now attach into government offices with all the proper constitutional protections, yes, but you cannot have a person acting against the interests of the people or betraying their duty, and because the Constitution says they can't be interfered with, there's no consequence, and you continue, no. So Mr. Barrett was quite right. And it's important for that statement to have been made, so that first of all to become more sensitive, and those who have responsibility or have the authority must take responsibility and do things. And so all these systems are things that we need to look at. So I feel we are at a brink of some serious change. First of all, people are openly speaking about a lot of the problems that in the past you wouldn't even bother to talk about. You thought you were powerless to change. But once it's articulated...
Of course, we still have some ministers who, when you complain to them that they are doing wrong things, their immediate answer is, but ain't the PNM used to do that too? I thought that's why we voted them out.
Of course.
Anyway, this conversation is going so beautifully. I think they want us to take a break.
Again.
They're probably feeling sorry for us. So we shall have a break, shall we?
Thank you.
And we'll return to the program. Welcome back to this program. And Council, the conversation has been good. I don't know if you call it Council, Minister, Prax, or whatever it is.
Prax is always good, you know.
Okay.
Yes.
You know, you had mentioned proportional representation.
Yes.
And parties like yours,
yes,
starting way back with Carl Hudson Phillips's ONR
yes,
in 1981, where they got 90,000 votes, not a seat. So all these 90,000 people were disenfranchised under the Constitution.
Yes.
Then again, there was
the COP in
2007 got
yes,
140-something thousand votes, no seat.
Yes.
And we had Jack Warner, Mr. Jack Warner, on the program last week.
Yes.
And I was pointing out to him that under the present Constitution, third parties cannot survive.
Well, that is why, I'm happy we get the opportunity to speak about this. After 2007, the COP embarked on something called a Grand Consensus, where we had gone to all the stakeholders, all the interest holders in the country, trade unions, NGOs, you name it, and had spoken with them and had partnered with them, so that when the election, the snap election of 2010 had come, the MSJ even came out of that grand consensus in a large part. And for the very point that you had raised about the interest groups being represented in the parliament. And the COP really is about interest groups.
Sure.
And a lot of people, and we get a lot of stick for sticking with the partnership. But we are very, very strong on the issue of policy to ensure that all of the stakeholders feel that there is a voice in the government. We may not be able to respond as well as we would like. I mean, numbers matter. Sure. But we fight a large fight within. And I want to say, and I congratulate the People's Partnership for having done so well in such a short period of time. You know how difficult government is.
Perhaps we usually open the lines.
Yes. Well, we have an open line here. So
no, the telephone line.
Of course.
During the program. So that we
course.
can interface
I'll be very happy for that.
with people and so on. And I think there's a caller on the line. Caller, are you there?
Yes, Mr. Panday. Good afternoon to you once again.
Good afternoon, sir.
And Mr. Ramadhar.
Good afternoon, brother.
You probably may recognize the voice. However, I am happy that we're having the reassurance from Mr. Ramadhar that we will, in fact, and it sounded absolute, have the constitution reform before the 2015 election. Because I happen to know that there are other interests in the society. You don't seem as enthusiastic as I have been. And I'm sure Mr. Ramadhar himself has been.
Yes.
And you see, the politics of our country is at such a stage now where more and more people are disconnecting themselves from what we want to call traditional political formations. Those formations that are based on the 3 R's, the race, religion, and region. Yes. And are finding themselves in the political space and demanding that their voices be heard. And save and accept, we move swiftly after 51 years, to create a constitutional framework that is consistent with our anthem, that gives everybody an opportunity to have their voice heard and to be represented in a place where laws are made.
Prakash, I think that comment is for you.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And this is what we've been discussing all for the entire program. The need for the people to be truly represented, not just the ability to elect someone, but when you elect that person, for them to represent your interests.
That's right.
And interests really is the future, as distinct from the racial divides. No country will succeed if it is divided. I want to see the day when the only divide we have in the country is between good and bad, you know. Forget your political party's name. If you have the interests of Trinidad and Tobago at heart and you work towards that end, welcome.
There's another caller on the line, I believe. Caller, yes?
Hello?
Yes, dear, are you there?
Hello, good evening to our former Prime Minister, Mr. Basdeo Panday.
Good evening,
and
my
our
dear.
present MP of St. Augustine, Mr. Prakash Ramadhar.
Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, my dear.
Yeah, I'm calling in to give you a suggestion here,
yes,
which I think will be very good for us to take a learn from it. A promise is a debt, just like the promises in the manifesto, which should be fulfilled for the people of TNT to benefit. So I hope it will happen as soon as possible, especially constitutional reform. And Mr. Panday, I must say thank you for your government giving us the Equal Opportunity and Freedom of Information Act. We will never forget this. Thank you. It's so beneficial.
Thank you, my dear. That's very kind of you. I believe there's another caller on the line. Yes, caller, please.
Hello, Mr. Panday.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I would like to speak on something outside of electoral reform, but directly related to constitutional reform.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I've been looking at the Constitution. I've been to some of the consultations. And I am concerned in the new Constitution, are we going to include rights of the other life outside of humans? I mean, Ecuador has a model where they cater for the environment. We've seen what is happening to our children. There's the right in Section 4 of the current Constitution to the right of the individual. But we don't have the rights of the family. We don't have the rights of the elders. There's a right for a parent to take care of a child, but there's no right for the child to take care of the parent when the parent needs taken care of.
Well, let me just say, we have to be careful. A constitution cannot in minute detail
Yes.
prescribe all of the rights. But for instance, let me tell you, when you spoke about the environment, that is something that we heard throughout the nation. The protection of the environment must be constitutionally protected. That is a recommendation to the length and breadth
But
of this
also,
country.
these human rights
Yes.
that have been...
Sections 4 and 5.
yes.
Yes.
But Section 4 and 5, what it does is, it states the rights rather vaguely, but it provides no mechanism by which the ordinary people can enforce these rights.
Apart
they
from
say,
the
go to
courts.
court now if you want, go to court
Yes,
now.
and that is why, the first caller spoke about Equal Opportunities Commission and the Freedom of Information. Those two things were, probably the most significant developments in the constitution of the country, in that they empowered the people to have access without having to go through a trial that is so expensive.
That is...
And then the freedom of information. That has opened up a whole different realm to the people. In the past, government was secretive, and you had no access whatsoever. And when the PNM came back into authority, they started to close some of the doors on that. The freedom of information is like a breath of air. It blows away the dust and the curtains that block our population.
As you talk about that, you remind me of something. When the PNM was in power, we had introduced the Freedom of Information Act as a. When the PNM came into power, they created a lot of exceptions.
That's the point. They're closing the windows.
I was hoping that this government would have removed those exceptions.
Well, we will be looking at those things too, because we truly believe that you need to put a light on any dark corner so that you won't be able to hide in the corner there and do your mischief without it being known. And that has a self-policing effect. If you know you do something today, but tomorrow, the law provides for somebody to say, hey, I want to know what you did there, and it has to be shown. Well then,
certainly.
If you feel you could hide it forever, sweep it under the carpet, it won't be seen, well then mischief is
absolutely
allowed.
correct. We have another caller on the line. Caller, yes, please.
Good night, everyone.
Good evening, brother.
Good night, everyone.
Good evening, brother.
Yes, good evening, good evening.
The UNC Alliance came into power, and one of the promises was no property tax. And the COP, one of their promises was to actually tax.
Yes.
But now we are hearing about industrial property tax. I would like to know if is this a break of their promises? Thank you.
Not at all. Let me just say and put this thing in context. The Axi Tax program, which I had started and went through the country and promised this population, had to do with, first of all, the old saying that there shall be no representation, no taxation without representation. And we were saying that, look, you want to introduce a property tax to communities. First of all, if you are going to do so, you must ensure that the money raised in communities must be used to the benefit of the community. And that evaluations must be reasonable to ensure that persons' homes will not be jeopardized, because some people may not be able to pay it and you lose it. We fought that. When we went to government, one of the first things we did is that we pushed that PNM demonic tax. I call it that because you had percentage increases of 6,000 to 8,000% in some cases. And that has been the case. Now, no country operates without some level of property taxation. So that there must be some balance. So industrial lands and industries, that is a matter the Minister of Finance is dealing with. But we say we will protect the homes of our people. Leave our home alone. That was the other part of the Axi Tax, leave our home alone.
Okay. You mentioned something about property tax being charged in order to develop the community.
Yes.
Yes. You therefore hit upon a nail, and I hope that you are all taking that in consideration. That is, constitutional reform must include local government reform.
The obscenity of the last administration putting off election from year to year for local government. Throughout the length and breadth of our consultations, people were saying that you have to protect that constitutionally date for local government election, and that is something that we are taking on board. But more important than that is the reform for local government. Now, I heard you made a statement about local government reform not having come. I agree with you. The consultations had gone way advanced. In fact, there's a report and recommendations as to how we proceed. And that must be instituted before the next general election in this term. I imagine so. But some of the reform recommendations that deal with those very things, about how you're better able to use the resources to ensure that the people of every community is well served with value for money. And you know, whilst we're on that issue, we have budgets, and I, as a minister, I could tell you this. A lot of the financial issues, the Auditor General needs to be empowered more greatly in terms of their resources to ensure that you have meaningful Auditor General's participation.
There's another caller on the line. Caller, yes, please.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Panday and Mr. Ramadhar.
Good evening, my dear.
First of all, I must say that, well, I congratulate Mr. Panday being our former Prime Minister, and he did a wonderful job at that time and that era. And I must compliment you, Mr. Ramadhar. You've been doing tremendous work. And my aunt this very day went to the legal affairs office. She's going to, for the first time, get her first name on the birth paper.
Yes.
And I must congratulate you for all that good work that you're doing.
Thank you.
But I have friends and they're asking me questions, and I don't know if I should direct the question in which direction, but this goes to Mr. Panday. Sometimes I get the impression that Mrs. Prasad Bissesso, she's not going on the right track, or she's you know, a lot of negative comments. But I think that I don't know if you can respond to that.
That's for you to decide, not me. I don't want to reduce this program to attacking people personally and so on. This is about a principle, the principle of constitutional reform, and maybe some other time, and maybe if I go back on the public platform, that may be the appropriate place for it. But no, you are raising important points. We are hoping that constitutional reform will remedy all of that.
Yeah. Well, let me just say, you know,
Sure.
what the caller spoke to is so important. When I became a minister, I said, you know, being a minister is not about me, it's about the people. And one of the first things we did in the Ministry of Legal Affairs is we opened 14 outlying offices that the Prime Minister authorized, so that you don't have to come into Port of Spain for many of the things in the past that you must have gone to Port of Spain to. In San Fernando, we've opened a full-level ministry that this government said, yes, you must do, and authorize and give us the funding to do it. And in terms of the people, we have been able to lower from wait times of days into minutes. You walk into the Ministry of Legal Affairs and some documents in 5 minutes, you're out of there. We open our offices to anybody where they come 5 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning from different parts of the country. We have created facilities so that you have water, you have washroom, you have coffee, and everything else from whatever hour you reach. So this is about the people empowerment. This is a people's partnership.
No, that's commendable. But why some of them can't get you guys on the phone?
And that is a matter that we continue.
But I must confess, I got you on the phone quite easily.
Well, of course. You see, Mr. Panday, I tell you what,
but
we
people,
get a lot of these criticisms.
But people complain that
you can't
ministers.
answer phones while you're in the Parliament. You can't answer phones when you're in the Cabinet. I can't answer phones when I'm in the LRC. I can't answer phone when I'm National Security. So very many hours of the day are spent in meetings to really further the work. But we have assistance. Right, and I have a system where you forward calls, and sometimes it fails.
All that will become unnecessary
Absolutely.
under a reformed constitution.
Absolutely.
We have another caller on the line, please. Yes, caller. Yes, please.
Hi, good night.
Good evening.
Hi, good night.
Good evening.
Yes, good night.
Yes, good night. How are you, Mr. Panday?
I'm fine, thank you.
It's so nice to see Mr. Ramadhar and you together again. I remember
Shake hands for that again.
the days when Ramadhar and Mr. Ramlogan were...
I told you I do not have a spiteful bone in my body.
Nor do I.
What I was... My reason for calling... My reason here for calling Mr. Ramadhar is directed towards you.
Yes.
Some of these offices that we have, where the Ministry of Legal Affairs is concerned, when you go there, these CSR representatives, and they are like pigs. I mean, sorry to say that they don't treat you in the manner that they're supposed to treat you, and they don't give you the information that you need. I was wondering, maybe you could make that part of your constitutional reform. And another thing that I would like to ask you is your election in 2010, you all have to remove the ceiling for pensioners In other words, everybody who reached the age of 65 would be entitled to a pension.
Well, first
As
of
for
all,
you?
in relation to, I'm surprised to hear, but I'm happy that you've told me, if you have issues with CSR, customer service representatives, in these offices that are not treating people well, that is something that I will not tolerate, and I'll ask for an investigation to be made. I'm sorry I didn't hear which of the offices that might have occurred, but it was never the intent for anybody to be abused.
We are due for a break, but let me mention something. Because of the political system that we have, people want to know they could contact their representative. And you know what I did when I was Prime Minister?
Tell me.
I set up a complaints authority within the office of the Prime Minister.
Right.
So that letters coming to the Prime Minister, I would have a secretary who would open the letters, and if the secretary thought, well, this is something that I should see personally, they'd send it on. If it was something for a ministry, they'd send it on to a ministry, but at least they'd reply and say, we have received your letter and we've sent it on to the ministry. I think that people,
That still happens.
because of the smallness of our country and our people interface in crucible-like conditions,
Yes.
they like to...
Well, but let me just say that I receive letters from the Prime Minister regularly on some complaints, and we deal with them.
Sure.
So that system is still clearly working.
Yes, we have another. I think they want us to take a break.
Let's go.
Do we have any callers on the line? Okay, so I want to thank you very much, because I think we are coming to the end of it, and I had written down about 10 pages of questions. I'm only joking, I'm only joking, that I wanted to ask you about. But what you have said has really cleared it up quite a lot. What I was, yeah. The only thing what I have done is I went on to the newspapers, and I thought that I'd take down a few things that I'd ask you about.
Yeah.
One was the Police Complaints Authority,
yes.
where I saw that the Police Complaints Authority has actually sent out a report in which they said that certain officials knew about this, knew about the flying squad. Are there going to be any consequences flowing from that?
Well, let me just say that I should not comment on that at this stage.
I respect that.
No, we must, because if there are to be consequences, I don't want it to be said that we interfere with that. But before we leave the issue of constitutional reform, there are many other issues that this nation will look forward to in this coming year. Procurement legislation should be in the Parliament within a short period of time. Campaign and finance reform. That is something my party has been very strong in promoting. I see that the EBC tomorrow and the day after, they're hosting consultations on those matters. So it is on the front burner. Issues of new planning legislation, as we see the degradation of the environment and the hills and the floods that are as a result of poor planning and so. These are the changes that we look forward to in this year.
You haven't got much time, you know.
And therefore, the work that is required will be concentrated. But I always believe that time will always expand, or work will always expand to fit the time given. And I think we need now to take on board the promises that we made and to fulfill them in this term. That is something that I am firmly of the view, that promises to our people is a sacred thing, and there are karmic consequences to the betrayal of that trust. I want to congratulate a lot of the work that has already been done by this government. Contrary to a lot of the criticisms, as you go through the countryside, you will see the sort of infrastructural development. Just this weekend, I had course to go through much of Central and to see the sort of work that has been going on quietly. And in many other parts, as you know, as a leader of the Congress, I go through the nation. I see so much work being done for communities that never expected it, water for so many others. We get criticized, yes.
You see, that's not my fault. The government has
it's poorly communicated.
Communication services, and
why?
It doesn't use it. They use it for propaganda instead of informing people.
No, you see, now, what is propaganda? If it is that when you advertise the good work, they call it propaganda, some people might get a little bit gun-shy. But I think it's important for the population to really take a little travel around your communities and see what has been done in the last 3 years. in terms of the Children's Life Fund, in terms of the laptop computers for children, something that you had dreamed of. You had dreamed of this, because I know you're a computer freak.
I take your word for it. But how time flies when you are having fun.
3.5 years and an hour.
Thank you,
Thank you
very much for accepting the invitation to be here. I'm sure a lot of people would have been much happier after hearing this program.
I was totally delighted to be here,
yes.
And I really enjoyed it.
Thank you
very much. Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago.